The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September of 1882, and Sarah Porter knew, before she unfolded the yellow paper, that her entire world was about to shatter. She stood in the doorway of her modest boarding house room in Denver, Colorado, her fingers trembling as she read the words once, twice, 3 times, hoping they might somehow rearrange themselves into a different message. But they remained stubbornly, brutally the same. Lucas Callahan was dead, killed in a mining accident up in Leadville. The wedding, planned for the following Saturday, would not happen. She was not going to become Mrs. Lucas Callahan after all. Sarah sank onto the narrow bed, the telegram slipping from her fingers to the floor. She did not cry. The shock was too profound for tears. Lucas had been so alive when she had seen him 3 weeks ago, his brown eyes bright with plans for their future, his hands gentle as he had held hers and promised her a good life in the mountains. He had secured a position as a mine supervisor, saved enough money for a small house, and written her letters full of hope and determination. Now he was gone, and she was alone in a city where she knew almost no one, with a wedding dress hanging in the wardrobe and no groom to wear it for. The days that followed passed in a blur of condolences from strangers and the awful practicalities of death. Sarah sent word to her aunt in St. Louis, the only family she had left, but knew no help would come from that direction. Her aunt had been barely civil when Sarah had announced her engagement to a Western miner, making it clear she thought Sarah was throwing her life away. Now, with Lucas gone, Sarah found herself in an impossible position. She had given up her position as a governess to come to Denver for the wedding. Her savings would last perhaps another month, maybe 2 if she was very careful. It was on the 5th day after receiving the news that the second letter arrived. This one was hand-delivered by a tall man with a weathered face who identified himself as Tom Murphy, a friend of the Callahan family. He pressed the envelope into her hands with an awkward pat on her shoulder and left before she could ask any questions. The handwriting was unfamiliar, bold and slightly uneven, as though the writer was unaccustomed to holding a pen. Sarah broke the seal and began to read. "Miss Porter," it began. "My name is Logan Callahan. I am Lucas's older brother. I cannot put into words how sorry I am for what has happened. Lucas spoke of you often in his letters. He loved you deeply and was counting the days until you would be his wife. I know this is poor comfort now, but I wanted you to know that his last thoughts were happy ones, full of plans for your life together. I am writing to you because I understand you are now in a difficult position. Lucas told me you had come west for the wedding and left your employment to do so. It troubles me greatly to think of you alone and without support in Denver. I have a proposition that may sound strange, perhaps even offensive, but I ask you to consider it carefully before you dismiss it out of hand. I live in the mountains west of here, near a small settlement called Aspen. I have a cabin, land, and the means to provide for a family. What I do not have is a wife, nor have I ever had much inclination toward finding one. I am not a man suited for polite society or gentle company. I trap, hunt, and trade, and I spend most of my time alone in the wilderness. But I am Lucas's brother, and I feel a responsibility toward you that I cannot ignore. I propose that we marry. Not a real marriage in the truest sense if that is not your wish, but a marriage in name that would give you security and a home. You would want for nothing. I would ask nothing of you that you did not wish to give. You would simply be safe, provided for, and able to make decisions about your future without the pressure of poverty or desperation. I know this is irregular. I know you do not know me. But Lucas trusted me, and I hope you might trust his judgment if not my own. If you are willing to consider this, I will be at the Grand Hotel on Friday at noon. If you do not come, I will understand and will arrange for funds to be sent to you to help you return east or establish yourself here, whichever you prefer. With respect, Logan Callahan. Sarah read the letter 3 times, her mind reeling. Marry a stranger, a mountain man she had never met. It was absurd, impossible. And yet, as she sat in her small room and calculated her remaining funds against the cost of returning east with nothing to return to, she found herself unable to dismiss the offer as quickly as she should have. Lucas had mentioned his brother only once or twice in his letters, an older brother who lived alone in the high country, who was rough around the edges but had a good heart. Lucas had seemed to admire him, even if their lives had taken very different paths. That was something, was it not? If Lucas had trusted this man, perhaps she could too. Friday came too quickly. Sarah dressed carefully in her best day dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her blonde hair up neatly and regarded herself in the small mirror. She was 22 years old, reasonably pretty, educated, and capable. She could find another position. She could return east. She did not have to do this. But as she walked through the streets of Denver toward the Grand Hotel, she knew she was going to meet Logan Callahan. If only to see what kind of man would make such an offer. The lobby of the Grand Hotel was elegant, all polished wood and brass fixtures. Sarah felt conspicuous as she entered, aware of her modest dress among the finery. She was about to ask at the desk when she saw him. He stood near the windows, his back to the room, and he was impossible to miss. Logan Callahan was a giant of a man, easily over 6 feet tall with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the light. His dark hair fell past his collar, thick and slightly unruly, and his clothes, though clean, were clearly those of a workingman. Leather pants, a heavy wool shirt, and boots made for hard travel. He did not belong in this refined space any more than a wolf belonged in a drawing room. As though sensing her gaze, he turned. Sarah caught her breath. He had the same strong bone structure as Lucas, the same straight nose and firm jaw, but where Lucas had been handsome in a refined way, Logan was something else entirely. His face was weathered and hard, marked by sun and wind and cold. His eyes were a startling gray, pale and direct, and they found her immediately across the room. There was something in those eyes that made her heart quicken, though she could not have said whether it was fear or something else. He moved toward her with surprising grace for such a large man, weaving between the furniture until he stood before her. Up close, he was even more imposing. Muscle rippled beneath his shirt, and his hands, when he removed his hat, were scarred and capable-looking. "Miss Porter." His voice was deep, rough with an edge that suggested long periods of disuse. "Mr. Callahan." She was pleased her voice did not shake. "Thank you for coming. I was not certain you would." He gestured to a quiet corner where 2 chairs sat near a window. "Will you sit?" They sat, and for a moment neither spoke. Logan seemed uncomfortable with the scrutiny of the other hotel guests, his jaw tight as he turned his hat in his hands. Finally, he looked at her directly. "I meant what I wrote in my letter. Every word. I know this is not a normal proposition, and I do not expect you to understand why I am making it. Truth is, I am not entirely certain myself, but Lucas was my brother, and you were going to be his wife. That means something to me. It means I cannot leave you to struggle when I have the means to help. You do not know me," Sarah said quietly. "I could be anyone. I could be a terrible person." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, though it did not reach his eyes. Lucas was a good judge of character. "If he loved you, that is enough for me. And you would truly ask nothing of me. This would be a marriage in name only." Logan met her gaze steadily. "I would ask that you keep my house if you were willing. Cook, mend, the things that need doing. But your person would be your own. I would not." I would not expect wifely duties unless you wished it. I am offering you security, Miss Porter. A roof, food, safety. In return, I get someone to manage the domestic matters I am terrible at, and the satisfaction of knowing I did right by my brother's memory. It was such a strange conversation to be having with a stranger. Sarah studied him, trying to see past the intimidating exterior to the man beneath. He was uncomfortable, that much was clear. His eyes kept darting to the door as though he wanted to bolt. But he sat there, solid and patient, waiting for her answer. "Why are you not married already?" she asked. "A man with property and means should have no trouble finding a wife." "I live alone by choice, Miss Porter. I am not an easy man. I have been in the mountains for 15 years, since I was 18. I do not do well with people, with towns, with all the things that civilized folks need. I like my solitude. A wife was never part of my plan." He paused, then added with brutal honesty, "But I also will not sleep easy knowing you are struggling because of my brother's death." There was something compelling about his directness. No pretty words, no false promises, just stark truth laid out for her to accept or reject. "I need time to think," Sarah said finally. Logan nodded. "Of course. I will be in Denver until Sunday morning. If you decide yes, meet me at the train station at 8. We will go to Aspen and be married there. If you do not come, I will have a bank draft sent to you for $500. That should be enough to get you started wherever you choose to go. $500. A fortune." He stood, and Sarah rose as well, feeling tiny beside him. "One more thing," Logan said, his gray eyes serious. "If you come with me, you should know what you are getting. The cabin is comfortable but simple. The winters are hard. Aspen is barely a town, more of a mining camp that is trying to grow into something respectable. There are rough men there and danger. It is not an easy life, but it is a good life in its way, clean and honest." "Thank you for being truthful," Sarah said. He nodded once, placed his hat back on his head, and walked away. Sarah watched him go, this strange mountain man who had offered her an escape from desperation, and wondered if she had lost her mind to even consider it. She did not sleep that night. She lay in bed and thought about Lucas, about the life they had planned, about the future that had been stolen from them. She thought about returning to St. Louis and her aunt's cold disapproval. She thought about trying to find work in Denver, a single woman with no references and dwindling funds. And she thought about Logan Callahan, with his scarred hands and direct gaze and his offer of security with no strings attached. By dawn, she had made her decision. Sunday morning found her at the train station with her 2 trunks and her heart in her throat. The platform was crowded with travelers, and for several minutes she did not see Logan. Panic fluttered in her chest. Had he changed his mind? But then the crowd parted, and there he was, tall and solid, and watching her with those pale gray eyes. "You came," he said, and something in his voice suggested he was surprised. "I came," Sarah confirmed. He picked up both her trunks as though they weighed nothing and led her to the train. They found seats in a car that was only half full, and as the train pulled out of Denver, Sarah watched the city disappear behind them and wondered what on earth she was doing. The journey to Aspen took most of the day. The train carried them west into the mountains, climbing higher and higher until the air grew thin and crisp. Logan was not much for conversation. He sat beside her, his large frame taking up more than his share of space, and watched the landscape pass with an expression that suggested he was thinking about things far away. "Tell me about Aspen," Sarah said finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. Logan stirred, as though surprised to remember she was there. "Not much to tell. Silver mining town growing fast. Maybe 3,000 people now, maybe more. There is a main street with the usual establishments. Saloons, hotel, general store, a office. More respectable than it was a few years back, but still rough around the edges. My cabin is about 5 miles outside of town, up in the high country, quiet, private. Do you have neighbors? A few, scattered around, mostly miners working claims, some trappers like me. There is a family about 2 miles east, the Hendersons, good people. Mary Henderson will be glad for female company, she does not get much of it. And the Winters. Logan looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw concern in his eyes. Hard. Snow comes early and stays late. We can get snowed in for days at a time. It is important to be prepared to have supplies laid in, but the cabin is solid. You will not freeze or starve. There was something comforting about his certainty, even as the reality of what she was doing settled over her like a weight. She was going into the wilderness with a man she did not know, to live in isolation through a mountain winter. It was madness. And yet, what other choice did she have? They arrived in Aspen as the sun was setting behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The town was exactly as Logan had described, a rough collection of buildings clustered in a narrow valley, with the mountains rising steep and imposing on all sides. The air was cold and thin, and Sarah felt lightheaded as she stepped off the train. "We will stay at the hotel tonight," Logan said, hefting her trunks again. "Get married in the morning. There is a justice of the peace who handles such things. Then we will head up to the cabin." The hotel was called the Silver Queen, and it was cleaner than Sarah had expected, though far from fancy. Logan secured 2 rooms, side by side, and carried her trunks to hers before retreating to his own with a brief "sleep well." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed in her room and tried to calm her racing heart. Tomorrow she would marry Logan Callahan. Tomorrow she would become the wife of a stranger, a mountain man who lived alone in the wilderness. Tomorrow her life would change forever. She did not sleep well. Every sound in the unfamiliar hotel seemed magnified, and her mind would not stop spinning through all the ways this could go wrong. But when dawn came and she rose to dress, she felt strangely calm. She had made her choice. Now she would live with it. Logan was waiting in the lobby, freshly shaved and wearing what appeared to be his best shirt. He still looked like a wild thing barely contained by civilization, but there was something almost gentle in the way he offered her his arm. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be," Sarah replied. The justice of the peace was a small man with spectacles who performed the ceremony in his office with his wife as witness. It was brief and businesslike, nothing like the wedding Sarah had dreamed of. But when Logan slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and repeated the vows in his deep, rough voice, she felt the weight of what they were doing. She was married. She was Sarah Callahan now. They signed the papers, and Logan paid the fee, and then they were walking back out into the bright mountain morning, husband and wife. "I need to get supplies before we head up," Logan said. "Things we will need for the winter. It will take a few hours." "You are welcome to come with me or rest at the hotel." "I will come," Sarah said. She wanted to see what her new life would look like, wanted to understand what she had gotten herself into. The general store was a revelation. Logan moved through it with efficiency, selecting flour and sugar and coffee and salt, dried beans and bacon and canned goods, ammunition and lamp oil and a dozen other necessities. He consulted with Sarah on a few items, asking her preferences for fabric and thread, and she found herself warming to his thoughtfulness. He was not ignoring her, not treating her as a burden. He was including her, considering her needs. When they left the store, Logan had arranged for the supplies to be loaded onto a wagon he had left at the livery. The wagon was hitched to 2 sturdy horses, and Logan helped Sarah up onto the bench seat before climbing up beside her. The trunks and supplies filled the back. "It is about a 2-hour drive," Logan said as he took up the reins. "The road is decent until the last mile, then it gets rough." He was not exaggerating. The first part of the journey was pleasant enough, following a well-worn track that wound along a creek and through stands of aspen trees that gleamed gold in the autumn sun. But as they climbed higher, the road narrowed and roughened, becoming little more than a trail. The wagon jolted over rocks and ruts, and Sarah had to hold on to keep from being thrown about. But then they rounded a bend, and the cabin came into view, and Sarah forgot about the rough road. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Built of logs, chinked tight against the weather, with a stone chimney rising from one end and a wide porch across the front. It sat in a small clearing, with the forest rising up behind it and a view down the valley that took her breath away. Mountains marched away in every direction, their peaks already dusted with snow, and the sky above was a blue so deep it hurt to look at. "It is not fancy," Logan said, and Sarah heard uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "But it is solid, and the view makes up for a lot." "It is wonderful," Sarah said honestly, and saw him relax slightly. He helped her down from the wagon and led her inside. The cabin was larger than it appeared from outside. One main room with a kitchen area along one wall and a stone fireplace along another. There were 2 doors leading off the main room, which Logan explained led to bedrooms. The furniture was simple but well made, the floor was clean swept wood, and there were windows that let in good light. "I added the second bedroom last year," Logan said. "Was thinking about using it for storage, but now it will be yours. The bed is new. I had it brought up from town last month." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "You planned this before you wrote to me?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I hoped you would say yes." Seemed prudent to be prepared. He showed her through the cabin, pointing out where things were kept, how the stove worked, the root cellar out back where the winter stores would go. His bedroom, when he opened the door briefly, was Spartan. A bed, a chest, little else. But her room had clearly been prepared with care. The bed was made up with clean linens. There was a rug on the floor, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and someone had even put wildflowers in a jar on the windowsill. "Did you do this?" Sarah asked, touching the flowers gently. "Mary Henderson," Logan admitted. "I asked her to help make it welcoming. I am not much good at such things." The thoughtfulness of it touched her. This rough mountain man had gone to his neighbor and asked for help making a room nice for the stranger he was bringing home as a wife. It spoke of a kindness she had not expected. They spent the rest of the day unloading the wagon and putting supplies away. Logan carried the heavy items, but Sarah organized and sorted, finding a rhythm to the work. He had been right, she thought. There was satisfaction in making order out of chaos, in setting up her new home. Because it was her home now, for better or worse. As evening fell, Logan built up the fire and set about making dinner. Sarah watched, surprised again, as he moved competently around the kitchen, frying bacon and beans and making coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. "I have been cooking for myself for a long time," he said when he caught her watching. "You do not need to worry that you will have to do everything. I pull my weight." They ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling, the darkness pressing close against the windows. When the meal was done and cleaned up, an awkward moment descended. They were married but strangers. They would sleep under the same roof, but in separate rooms. How did one navigate such a thing? Logan solved it by standing and stretching, his muscles moving beneath his shirt in a way that made Sarah look away quickly. "It has been a long day. I imagine you are tired. I will bank the fire and make sure everything is secure. You should rest." "Thank you," Sarah said, "for everything, for this." He looked at her, his gray eyes unreadable in the firelight. "No need for thanks. We are doing each other a service, that is all." But as Sarah lay in her new bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain and the quiet movements of Logan in the other room, she wondered if it really was that simple. She had married this man. She lived in his home. She wore his ring. At what point did a marriage of convenience become something else? And more troublingly, did she want it to? The days fell into a pattern. Sarah rose early and made breakfast while Logan tended to the horses and the few chickens he kept in a coop behind the cabin. They ate together. Then Logan would head out to check his trap lines or hunt, leaving Sarah to manage the household. She cleaned and cooked and mended, and in the afternoons, when the light was good, she explored the area around the cabin. The forest was beautiful and slightly terrifying, full of life and wildness that she had never experienced in her careful Eastern upbringing. Logan was not talkative, but he was not unkind. He answered her questions when she asked them, taught her how to recognize animal tracks and which plants were edible. He brought her game to cook, showed her how to prepare it properly. He fixed things that needed fixing and split wood for the fire and never once made her feel like a burden. But there was a distance between them, a careful politeness that felt increasingly fragile as the days turned into weeks. They were dancing around each other, Sarah realized. Two people living in close quarters, bound by law but not by emotion, trying to figure out what they were to each other. It was about 3 weeks after their arrival at the cabin that things began to shift. Sarah was working in the root cellar, organizing the winter supplies, when she heard Logan return earlier than expected from his trap line. She climbed the ladder and found him in the main room, blood on his shirt and his face tight with pain. "What happened?" she demanded, rushing to him. "Nothing, just a scratch. Bear took exception to me checking a trap too close to her den." He was trying to remove his shirt with one hand, the other arm clearly injured. "Sit down," Sarah ordered, pushing him toward a chair. She helped him remove the shirt and sucked in a breath at what she saw. 3 deep gouges ran from his shoulder halfway down his arm, bleeding steadily. "This is not a scratch, Logan. This is serious." "I have had worse," he said, but his face was pale under his tan. Sarah went to work with quick efficiency, heating water, finding clean cloth, retrieving the whiskey Logan kept for medicinal purposes. She cleaned the wounds as gently as she could, but he hissed with pain despite his stoicism. "You need a doctor," she said. "No, doctor. You are doing fine. Just clean it and wrap it. It will heal. It could get infected. Then you will clean it again tomorrow and the day after until it does not." He looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "I trust you, Sarah." It was the first time he had used her given name. He had been calling her Miss Porter or Madam since they met, maintaining that careful distance. Hearing her name in his rough voice did something to her heart that she was not prepared for. She finished cleaning and bandaging the wounds, her hands gentle despite her worry. When she was done, Logan caught her hand in his good one, his grip warm and strong. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You did not have to do that. I know nursing a wounded mountain man was not part of our agreement. We are married, Logan. Of course I was going to help you." The words hung between them, laden with implications neither seemed ready to address. He released her hand and stood, swaying slightly. Sarah insisted he rest, and for once, he did not argue. He retreated to his room, and Sarah spent the rest of the day worried and restless, checking on him every few hours. The wounds did not look infected, but they were deep, and she knew the danger was not over. Over the next few days, she tended to his injuries with care, changing bandages and watching for signs of fever. Logan bore it with patience, though she could tell he hated being laid up. He was a man used to constant activity, and being forced to rest chafed at him. But the forced proximity changed something between them. They talked more, sharing stories to pass the time. Logan told her about his years in the mountains, about the places he had been and the things he had seen. Sarah told him about her childhood in St. Louis, her work as a governess, her dreams of a different life. She spoke of Lucas too, the grief still raw but no longer quite so sharp. "He was a good man," Logan said one evening as they sat by the fire. "His arm was healing well, the wound scabbing over cleanly. Better than me in a lot of ways. Smarter, more polished, he would have given you a good life." "You are giving me a good life," Sarah said quietly. Logan looked at her, surprise clear on his weathered face. "Am I? You are a good man too, Logan. Different from Lucas, yes, but good in your own way. Honest and kind and reliable. Those are not small things." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the careful walls he kept around himself. "I am glad you think so. I have not been sure if I did right by you bringing you here. Some days I think maybe I was selfish, wanting to help but also not wanting to be alone anymore." It was the most vulnerable thing he had said to her, and Sarah felt her heart soften further. "I am glad you brought me here. I did not know it at first, but I am glad now." Their eyes met across the firelight, and for a moment the cabin seemed to shrink around them, the space between them charged with something neither had acknowledged before. Then Logan looked away and the moment passed, but the change remained. Something had shifted between them. A door had opened just a crack, and Sarah knew there would be no going back to the careful distance they had maintained. October slipped into November, and the first real snow came, blanketing the mountains in white. Logan pronounced himself healed enough to return to his trap lines, though Sarah watched him closely for any signs of trouble. The wounds had left scars, 3 pale lines across his tanned skin, but the arm was strong again, the danger past. They settled into a new rhythm, one that felt less like two strangers sharing space and more like two people building something together. Logan taught Sarah to shoot, patiently showing her how to handle the rifle until she could hit a target more often than not. Sarah taught Logan the pleasure of a well-made pie, experimenting with dried fruit and preserves until even he admitted it was worth the effort. They talked more, the silences between them comfortable rather than awkward. Logan began to seek her opinion on things, asking her thoughts on where to put his traps or how to arrange the woodpile for easiest access in deep snow. Sarah found herself looking forward to his return each day, listening for the sound of his footsteps on the porch, feeling the cabin come alive when he entered it. It was not love, she told herself. It was companionship, friendship, the natural result of two people living in close quarters and finding they got along well. But when Logan smiled at her, his rare smiles that transformed his stern face, her heart did things that felt suspiciously like more than friendship. And when his hand brushed hers as he passed her something at dinner, she felt warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. The first time she acknowledged what was happening was a morning in mid-November. She woke before dawn, as she often did, and padded quietly to the main room to start the fire. But Logan was already there, standing by the window in just his trousers, his chest and feet bare, looking out at the snow. The firelight gilded his skin, highlighting the powerful muscles of his back and shoulders, the narrow taper of his waist. He was beautiful in a raw, elemental way like the mountains themselves, and Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught in her throat. He turned then, sensing her presence, and their eyes met across the room. The air seemed to thicken between them, heavy with unspoken things. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Logan cleared his throat and reached for his shirt. "Did not mean to wake you. The cold gets into my bones sometimes. Thought I would get the fire going early. "You did not wake me," Sarah said, her voice not quite steady. "I will make coffee." They moved around each other in the kitchen, the space too small to avoid occasional contact. Each brush of arm against arm, each accidental touch, felt electric. Sarah poured coffee with trembling hands and wondered when exactly she had fallen in love with her husband. Because that was what had happened, she realized with a shock that left her breathless. Somewhere between his gruff proposal in Denver and this cold November morning, she had fallen in love with Logan Callahan. With his quiet strength and unexpected gentleness, with his scars and his silences and the way he looked at her sometimes like she was something precious. She loved him, and she had no idea what to do about it. Their agreement had been clear: a marriage in name only. Security in exchange for housekeeping. No expectations, no demands. She could not simply announce that she had changed the terms, that she wanted more than what they had bargained for. Could she? The question tormented her over the next few weeks. She caught herself watching Logan when she thought he was not looking, memorizing the details of him. The way his hair curled slightly at his nape when it needed cutting. The calluses on his hands. The rare laugh that rumbled up from deep in his chest when something genuinely amused him. She wanted to touch him, to erase the distance between them, but she was afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of ruining what they had built, afraid of her own wanting. Winter closed in around the cabin with a vengeance. The snow came heavy and often, piling up in drifts that reached the windowsills. Logan spent his days chopping wood, checking on the animals, making sure they had everything they needed to weather the storms. Sarah kept the cabin warm and welcoming, cooked hearty meals, and mended their clothes by firelight. They were snowed in more often than not, trapped together in the small space, and the forced intimacy was both wonderful and torturous. It was during one of these storms in early December that everything changed. They had been snowed in for 3 days, the wind howling outside like a living thing, and the enforced closeness had made both of them restless. After dinner, Logan paced the cabin like a caged wolf while Sarah tried to focus on her mending. "I am sorry," he said finally, stopping to look at her. "I am not good at being idle. It makes me irritable. I understand the storm will break soon. You never complain." He said it wonderingly, as though just realizing. "About anything. The isolation, the cold, the lack of company. You just make the best of it all. What good would complaining do? This is my life now, our life. I am happy enough with it." "Are you?" He moved closer, his gray eyes intense. "Truly? Because sometimes I think I trapped you here, that you are making the best of a bad situation but secretly wishing you were anywhere else." Sarah set down her mending and stood to face him. "I am not trapped. I chose this. I choose it every day." "Why?" The word was almost desperate. "You could have taken the money and gone anywhere. Started over. Found another position or another husband. Someone better suited to you than a rough mountain man who barely knows how to talk to people." "Because you are not as rough as you think," Sarah said, her heart pounding. "Because you are kind and good and you make me feel safe. Because I like my life here with you." "Sarah." Her name was a breath, and he took another step toward her, so close now she had to tilt her head back to see his face. "I have tried. God knows I have tried to keep my distance to honor our agreement, but I cannot stop thinking about you, cannot stop wanting more than we agreed to." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying this marriage was supposed to be in name only, but somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like pretend. I am saying I want you as my wife in truth if you will have me. I am saying I love you." The words hung in the air between them, stark and honest and utterly undeniable. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes, joy flooding through her so intensely it was almost pain. "I love you too," she whispered. I have been so afraid to say it, afraid you did not feel the same." Logan made a sound that was half laugh, half groan, and then his hands were cupping her face, tilting it up to his. "Can I kiss you? I have wanted to kiss you for weeks now." "Yes," Sarah breathed, and then his mouth was on hers. It was nothing like the chaste kiss they had shared at their wedding. This was heat and hunger, weeks of denied wanting pouring into the contact. Logan kissed her like she was air and he had been drowning, deep and thorough and claiming. Sarah clutched at his shoulders, the muscles solid under her hands, and kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Logan rested his forehead against hers. "I should not have waited so long. Should have told you sooner." "We both should have," Sarah said, her fingers tangling in his hair. "But we are telling each other now. That is what matters." He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. Then he swept her up in his arms, making her gasp and laugh, and carried her to his bedroom. Their bedroom now. "Are you certain?" he asked, setting her gently on the bed. "We do not have to rush this." Sarah reached up and pulled him down to her. "I am certain. I want this. I want you." The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, there was only warmth and love and the slow, sweet discovery of each other. Logan was gentle despite his size and strength, patient and attentive, making sure of her pleasure before seeking his own. And when they finally lay tangled together in the firelight, Sarah felt complete in a way she never had before. This was what she had been missing, what she had not even known she needed. Not just physical intimacy, but this bone-deep connection, this sense of belonging wholly to another person and having them belong to her in return. "I never thought I would have this," Logan said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "A wife, a real marriage, love. I thought I was too rough, too set in my ways, but you fit here, Sarah. You fit with me." "I never thought I would have this either," Sarah confessed. "When Lucas died, I thought my chance at love had died with him. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, nothing more. But you have given me so much more than security, Logan. You have given me joy." He kissed her temple, pulled her closer against his warm bulk. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret it. You are the best choice I ever made." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and when Sarah woke in the morning, still held safe in Logan's arms, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Their relationship, now openly acknowledged, deepened with every day. They were no longer two separate people sharing space, but a true partnership, working together to survive and thrive in the harsh mountain environment. Logan taught Sarah everything he knew about wilderness survival, clearly determined that she would be able to take care of herself if anything ever happened to him. Sarah brought gentleness and warmth into his life, softening the hard edges that years of solitude had created. They celebrated Christmas simply, with a small tree Logan cut from the forest and decorations Sarah fashioned from scraps and natural materials. Logan surprised her with a hand-carved music box he had been secretly working on for weeks, and Sarah gave him a new shirt she had sewn, embroidered with his initials. They made love by the firelight and talked about the future, about the life they were building together. In January, they made the trek down to visit Mary and John Henderson, the neighbors Logan had mentioned. Mary was a sturdy woman in her 40s with a weathered face and kind eyes, and she welcomed Sarah with open arms. "I am so glad Logan finally found himself a wife," Mary said, pulling Sarah into a hug. "He has been alone up there too long. A man needs a woman to make a house a home." "I think I needed him as much as he needed me," Sarah said honestly. Mary studied her with shrewd eyes. "This was not a love match at first, was it? Logan told us the circumstances when he asked me to help prepare the cabin. No, but it became one. The best marriages often grow from such beginnings, Mary said sagely. When you start with respect and kindness, love has room to grow natural-like. You two will be just fine. The visit was wonderful. A few hours of easy conversation and shared food, and Sarah left with promises to return in the spring. It was good to know they had neighbors, good people they could rely on if needed. February brought the deepest snows and the coldest temperatures. They were snowed in for nearly 2 weeks straight, but Sarah did not mind. She had everything she needed within the walls of their cabin. Logan kept the fire burning and the cabin warm, and they passed the long evenings reading aloud to each other from the few books Logan owned, playing cards, and making love with increasing familiarity and joy. It was during one of these snowbound evenings that Sarah realized she might be pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice now, and there were other signs, subtle but unmistakable. She waited a few more weeks to be certain before telling Logan, afraid to give him false hope. When she finally told him, on a bright March morning with the first signs of spring appearing in the melting snow, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face transformed with joy, and he picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Sarah asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it. You have given me everything, Sarah. A home, love, and now a child. I do not deserve any of it, but I will spend my life trying to be worthy of you." "You are already worthy," Sarah said firmly. "You are the best man I know, Logan Callahan." Spring came fully, transforming the mountains into a wonderland of wildflowers and rushing streams swollen with snowmelt. Sarah's pregnancy progressed well, and Logan fussed over her constantly, trying to keep her from doing any heavy work. They made plans for the baby, Logan building a cradle from smooth pine, and Sarah sewing tiny clothes from soft fabric Logan brought back from town. In May, Mary Henderson came to visit and confirmed what Sarah already knew. The baby would come in late October, and Sarah was healthy and strong. Mary promised to come help with the birth when the time came, and Sarah felt reassured knowing she would have an experienced woman with her. The summer was glorious. Logan took Sarah on gentle hikes, showing her hidden meadows and secret places in the mountains he loved. They picnicked by alpine lakes and watched eagles soar overhead. They made love under the stars and talked about the future, about whether the baby would be a boy or girl, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want to be better than my father was," Logan said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He was a hard man, quick with his fists and slow with affection. "Lucas and I both bore the brunt of his temper. I will not be that kind of father." "You could never be," Sarah said, taking his hand. "You are gentle and patient. You will be a wonderful father." As her belly grew round with their child, Sarah felt more content than she had ever thought possible. This life, this wild mountain existence with the man she loved, was more fulfilling than anything she had imagined in her careful dreams back east. She had found her place, her purpose, her home. In September, Logan began preparing in earnest for the winter and the baby's arrival. He laid in extra supplies, made sure the cabin was well chinked and secure, and checked and rechecked that they had everything they might need. He rode down to Aspen and arranged for Mary Henderson to stay with them starting in mid-October, just to be safe. Sarah found his worry endearing, even as she reassured him constantly that she felt fine. The baby moved strongly inside her, and she felt confident in her body's ability to do what it was designed to do. Mary arrived on October 15th, bringing her practical presence and calm competence. She and Sarah got along famously, and Logan looked relieved to have someone experienced in the cabin. The baby came on October 23rd, just as the first autumn snow was beginning to fall. The labor was long and hard, and Logan paced outside like a caged animal, forbidden from the room by Mary until it was all over. But when he was finally allowed in, when he saw Sarah exhausted but glowing, holding their newborn son, he fell to his knees beside the bed with tears streaming down his weathered face. "A son," he whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand with one scarred finger. "We have a son." "Lucas," Sarah said softly. "I thought we might name him Lucas after your brother, if that is all right with you." Logan's face crumpled and he buried it against Sarah's shoulder, his big body shaking with emotion. "More than all right. It is perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for everything." Little Lucas was a healthy, hungry baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's delicate features. Logan was besotted from the first moment, holding his son with a gentleness that belied his size and strength. He helped with everything, changing cloths and walking the floor with the baby when he fussed, never complaining even when exhausted. Mary stayed for 2 weeks, making sure Sarah recovered well and teaching her all the tricks of new motherhood. When she finally left, promising to return in the spring, Sarah felt ready to manage on her own. The winter that followed was harder than the previous one, simply because they had an infant to care for, but it was also sweeter. Sarah would wake in the night to feed Lucas and find Logan already awake, watching them both with an expression of such love it made her heart ache. They were a family now, bound together by blood and love and choice. Spring came again, and Lucas grew into a chubby, happy baby who laughed at everything and seemed to have no fear. Logan took him outside constantly, showing him the mountains, the animals, the trees. Sarah would watch them together, the huge mountain man and the tiny baby, and feel her heart swell with gratitude for the strange path that had brought her here. One evening in May, when Lucas was 7 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Logan and Sarah sat on the porch and watched the sunset together. "Do you ever regret it?" Logan asked quietly. "Saying yes that day in Denver, giving up the life you might have had?" Sarah looked at him, this man who had saved her with his unexpected proposal, who had become her best friend and lover and the father of her child. "Never. Not even for a moment. This life, this wild, hard, beautiful life with you is better than any I could have imagined. You gave me everything, Logan. A home, a family, love. You gave me myself." He pulled her close, kissed her temple. "You gave me the same. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me how to live again, how to feel. I love you, Sarah Callahan. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too. Always." They sat together as the stars began to emerge, the mountains' dark shapes against the deepening sky, and Sarah felt complete. She had come west for a wedding that never happened, had married a stranger to escape desperation, and had found everything she had ever wanted without even knowing she wanted it. Life in the mountains continued its pattern of hard work and simple joys. Lucas grew into a sturdy toddler, fearless and curious, and Logan proved to be exactly the kind of father he had hoped to be. Patient and loving, teaching his son about the wilderness with the same care he had shown Sarah. They talked about having more children, and Sarah hoped they would. She wanted to fill their cabin with life and laughter. When Lucas was 2 years old, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with joy but no surprise. They knew what to expect now, were prepared. Logan had already started building an addition onto the cabin, adding another bedroom for when Lucas was old enough to need his own space. Their daughter was born in September, during a golden autumn afternoon when the aspens were turning the mountainsides to flame. Logan had stayed with Sarah this time, holding her hand through the labor, and when tiny Emma took her first breath and let out a lusty cry, he laughed through his tears. "A daughter. We have a daughter, Sarah." Emma was different from Lucas, more delicate and thoughtful, with Sarah's blonde hair and a sunny disposition. Lucas adored his baby sister from the first moment, wanting to help with everything, and Sarah's heart swelled watching her little family grow. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. More children came, 2 more sons, and the cabin rang with the sounds of childhood. Logan expanded the cabin twice more, adding rooms and a larger kitchen, building a barn for the animals and a workshop for his projects. He taught all the children to ride, to shoot, to respect the wilderness and their place in it. Sarah became known in the growing town of Aspen as a woman of capability and warmth. She helped other women when they needed it, delivered babies when Mary Henderson was not available, and always had her door open to those in need. The rough mining town gradually became more civilized, and Sarah was part of that transformation, bringing grace and kindness to the hard mountain life. But through it all, at the center of everything, was her relationship with Logan. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone when the children were asleep, going on rides together into the high country, keeping the romance and passion that had surprised them both those first years. He was still her mountain man, rough and strong and utterly devoted to his family. She was still his unexpected blessing, the woman who had agreed to marry a stranger and had given him a life beyond his wildest dreams. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Logan took Sarah on a trip, leaving the children with the Hendersons for a weekend. He brought her to a high meadow he had found years before, a place of surpassing beauty where wildflowers carpeted the ground and the mountains rose in every direction. "This is where I come when I need to think," he told her as they stood hand in hand in the meadow. "This is my favorite place in all the world, and I wanted to bring you here to share it with you, because you are my favorite person in all the world." "It is beautiful," Sarah said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. 10 years ago, I stood in a hotel in Denver and made a practical proposal to a woman I had never met. I told myself I was doing the honorable thing, taking care of my brother's intended. But the truth is, I was lonely. I was tired of being alone. I wanted something more, even if I could not admit it to myself. "Logan, let me finish. I need to say this." He took both her hands in his, those scarred, capable hands that had held her through joy and sorrow, that had built their home and cradled their children. "You could have been anyone, and I would have been grateful just to have company. But you were you, brave and kind and stronger than you knew. You took a chance on a rough mountain man, and you built a life here that I never imagined possible. You gave me love, a family, a reason to be better than I was. Every day with you is a gift, Sarah, every single day." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, her heart too full for words. "You saved me, Logan. When Lucas died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never be happy again. But you gave me a new life, a better life. You showed me what real love looks like. It is not grand gestures or pretty words. It is showing up every day. It is building something together, piece by piece. It is choosing each other over and over. And I choose you, Logan Callahan, today and always." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and full of all the love they had built over 10 years. When they finally pulled apart, Logan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I never gave you a proper engagement ring. Seemed foolish at the time, since it was not a real engagement. But it is real now. It has been real for a long time, so I wanted to give you this." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple but beautiful, a sapphire the color of the mountain sky surrounded by small diamonds. "Logan, it is beautiful." He slipped it onto her finger beside the simple gold band she had worn for 10 years. "You are beautiful, inside and out, and I am the luckiest man alive to call you my wife." They spent the afternoon in the meadow, talking and laughing and remembering. They talked about their children, about their hopes for the future, about growing old together in the mountains they both loved. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Logan pulled Sarah close. "I would do it all again," he said quietly. "Every moment, every choice, every hardship, all of it just to end up here with you." "So would I," Sarah said, without hesitation, without regret. "This is my life, Logan. You are my life, and it is more than I ever dreamed of." They rode back to the cabin as the stars began to emerge, and Sarah thought about the path that had brought her here. A death that had seemed like the end of everything. A proposal from a stranger that had seemed like madness. A slow falling in love with a man who had started as an obligation and had become everything. Life was strange and beautiful and full of unexpected gifts. She had come west to marry Logan Callahan and had ended up married to his brother instead. She had thought she was settling for second best, but she had found something infinitely better. She had found her true match, her real love, her home. The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of joy and occasional sorrow, triumph and hardship, but always, always, with love at the center. Logan remained her rock, her partner, her best friend. She remained his light, his home, his heart. Their children grew strong and capable, inheriting their father's love of the wilderness and their mother's kindness. The oldest, Lucas, grew into a young man who looked so much like the uncle he was named for that it sometimes took Sarah's breath away. But he had his father's steady character, his gentleness with those weaker than himself. Emma became a teacher in Aspen, bringing education to the mountain children. The younger boys followed in their father's footsteps, learning the ways of the wilderness, becoming mountain men in their own right. As Sarah and Logan aged, their hair turning gray and their bodies showing the wear of hard mountain living, their love only deepened. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative. They had buried friends and celebrated births. They had seen Aspen transform from a rough mining camp into a proper town. Through it all, they had each other. On a warm summer evening, when they were both in their 50s and their grandchildren played in the yard outside the cabin that had seen so much love, Logan and Sarah sat on the porch together, holding hands as they watched the sunset. "You remember that first night here?" Logan asked. "How awkward we were, how careful around each other. I remember thinking I had made the biggest mistake of my life," Sarah admitted with a laugh. "I barely knew you. You barely spoke. I had no idea what I was doing. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made. Marrying you, coming here, building this life, all of it. Every moment has been worth it." Logan raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. "I never thanked Lucas. After he died, I was so angry, so grief-stricken. But in a strange way, his death gave me life. It brought you to me. I wish he was here to see what we built, to know his nieces and nephews and know that his name lives on. But I am grateful for everything, even the tragedy that brought us together." "I think he would be happy for us," Sarah said softly. "I think he would be glad to know I was loved and cared for, that I found happiness even after losing him. Love is not diminished by finding it again. It is multiplied." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from decades of shared life. In the distance, the mountains rose eternal, the same mountains that had witnessed their first awkward days, their falling in love, the births of their children, and all the moments in between. the mountains that would stand long after they were gone, a testament to the enduring nature of the wild places and the wild hearts that chose to make a home in them. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge, one by one, Logan pulled Sarah close. She rested her head on his broad shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and felt complete. This was her life. This wild, hard, beautiful life in the mountains with the man she loved. She had come west for a wedding that never happened and had found something infinitely better. She had found home. She had found love. She had found herself. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. Not the proposal from a stranger, though that had been the beginning. Not the security of a marriage in name only, though that had given her the time and space to heal. But the slow, sweet discovery that love could come when least expected, that it could grow in the most unlikely soil, that it could transform everything. Logan had offered his name out of duty and honor. He had offered his heart because he could not help himself. And Sarah had accepted both, tentatively at first, and then with her whole being. Together, they had built something real and lasting, something that would echo down through generations in the children and grandchildren who bore their names and their values. The mountain man and the widow who came west for a wedding that never happened. It sounded like the beginning of a tragedy. But it had become a love story for the ages. Proof that sometimes the worst moments of life can lead to the best, that endings can become beginnings, and that love, real love, can flourish even in the harshest conditions. As Sarah drifted to sleep that night, safe in Logan's arms as she had been for so many years, she whispered a prayer of gratitude. For the stranger who had offered her a lifeline, for the mountain man who had offered her his heart, for the life they had built together, log by log, day by day, choice by choice, for the love that had surprised them both and had sustained them through everything. It had started with death and desperation. It had become a testament to hope, resilience, and the transforming power of love. And as the mountains kept their silent watch over the cabin where Sarah and Logan slept, wrapped around each other as they had been for decades, the stars wheeled overhead, eternal and unchanging, witnesses to one more love story in a world that needed as many as it could get. The Wild West was a hard place, unforgiving and dangerous. But it was also a place where new beginnings were possible, where people could reinvent themselves, where love could take root in the most unexpected ways. Sarah Porter had come west as a bride-to-be and had become Sarah Callahan, wife, mother, grandmother, and the heart of a family that stretched across the mountains she had come to call home. And Logan Callahan, the solitary mountain man who had lived alone for so long, had discovered that he was never meant to be alone at all. He was meant to be a husband, a father, a pillar of strength for the family he had never imagined he would have. He was meant to love Sarah with everything in him, to build a life with her that would outlast them both in the stories told and the legacy left behind. Their story, which had begun with such sorrow, had become a celebration of life, love, and the courage to take a chance on something uncertain. It had become proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. That sometimes saying yes to a stranger's proposal can lead to the greatest love story of all. And as the years continued to pass, as Sarah and Logan grew old together in the mountains they loved, surrounded by the family they had created, they never forgot the journey that had brought them together. The telegram that had shattered Sarah's world, the letter that had offered her a lifeline, the choice they had both made to try something that seemed impossible. They had chosen each other, first out of necessity and duty, and then out of love so deep it became the foundation of everything they built. They had chosen this life, this wild mountain existence, and had made it into something beautiful. They had taken brokenness and fashioned it into wholeness. They had taken loneliness and transformed it into belonging. In the end, that was what love did. It transformed. It healed. It made whole what had been shattered. And Sarah and Logan's love had done all of that and more. It had created a family, a legacy, a life worth living. It had proven that sometimes the worst thing that could happen could lead directly to the best thing that ever would. Their story, the mountain man and the widow, the marriage that began as convenience and became the deepest love either had ever known, would be told and retold in the family for generations. It would become the foundation story, the one that explained where they all came from and what they valued. Love, family, courage, the willingness to take a chance on something uncertain and see it through to the end. And high in the Colorado mountains, in a cabin that had been expanded and improved over the decades, but still stood solid and strong, Sarah and Logan Callahan lived out their days surrounded by love. They had found each other in the darkest moment, and they had built a light that would shine for generations. They had taken a marriage of convenience and had made it into the greatest love story of their lives. That was the true magic of it all. Not that they had fallen in love despite the circumstances of their meeting, but that they had built something real and lasting from such fragile beginnings. They had taken a moment of tragedy and had transformed it into a lifetime of joy. They had honored Lucas's memory not with grief alone, but with the life they had built, the love they had shared, the family that bore his name and his legacy. And as the sun set on their lives, as they looked back on all they had accomplished and all they had been to each other, both Sarah and Logan knew with absolute certainty that they would not change a single thing. Every hardship had been worth it. Every challenge had strengthened them. Every moment of joy had been earned through the moments of sorrow that had come before. They had started as strangers bound by circumstance. They had become partners, friends, lovers, and the center of each other's worlds. They had built a family, a home, a life that mattered. And they had done it all together, side by side, choosing each other every single day. That was the real story. Not the dramatic beginning or the various challenges they had faced, but the simple, profound act of choosing each other day after day, year after year, through everything life threw at them. That was what made their love story worth telling. That was what made it last. The mountain man had offered his name to his dead brother's widow. He had offered it out of duty and honor, never expecting anything in return. But in the offering, he had opened the door to something neither of them had anticipated. He had opened the door to love, real and deep and transforming. And when he had finally offered his heart as well, Sarah had taken it and had given her own in return. Together, they had created something beautiful in the harsh mountain wilderness. They had proven that love could bloom anywhere, even in the most unlikely circumstances. They had shown that endings could become beginnings, that sorrow could transform into joy, that a marriage of convenience could become the love of a lifetime. And that, in the end, was the story of Sarah and Logan Callahan. Two people who had come together through tragedy and had built a love that would last forever. Two people who had taken a chance on each other and had found everything they had ever wanted without even knowing they wanted it. Two people who proved that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start in the most unexpected ways. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the values they had instilled and the love they had modeled. It lived on in the cabin that still stood strong in the mountains, a testament to what could be built with patience and care and dedication. It lived on in the stories told around fires and dinner tables, reminding each new generation that love was always worth fighting for, that family was everything, and that sometimes the greatest adventures came from simply saying yes to something uncertain and seeing where it led. Sarah and Logan had said yes, to each other, to the mountains, to a life that was hard but beautiful, to love that surprised them both. And that yes had echoed down through the years, creating ripples that would last long after they were gone. They had built something that mattered. They had loved deeply and well. They had lived fully and without regret. And in the end, as they held hands and watched one more sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, they knew they had gotten it exactly right. They had found each other when both needed finding. They had built a life together when both needed something to build. They had loved each other when both needed loving. It had started with her groom dying a week before the wedding. It had continued with his mountain man brother offering his name. But it had become something neither could have predicted. It had become the greatest love story either had ever known, the foundation of a family that would last for generations, proof that love could be found in the most unexpected places and could flourish even in the harshest conditions. That was their story. That was their legacy. That was the life they had built together, log by log, day by day, choice by choice, and it was everything, absolutely everything. And they lived happily together until their final days, surrounded by the love they had created and the family they had built, knowing they had gotten this one thing absolutely, perfectly right.